G'day, members. It's Seamus, your Whisky Club head of whiskey, and I am here with an all-time whiskey legend. Now, almost all of you are going to be looking at one of the bottles from his fair distillery. It is Mr. Iain McAlister, the master distiller of Glen Scotia. How are you, mate?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Seamus. Absolute pleasure to be here. So yeah, thank you.
Mate, it's easy to have you. You've become a favourite of Whisky Club members before we've even done a Whisky of the Month. And it's because you've crawled across to Australia a few times. We had to start sending you wallabies and things, right?
Yeah. I really loved my visit to Tasmania. Sean was obviously brilliant. He took me there, got to meet yourself and the team, and visit the office. Had a wee tasting. It was brilliant, absolutely, brilliant. Met so many lovely people there. So what a wonderful place. Reminds me so much of Campbelltown, actually, Hobart. So yeah, wonderful, lovely.
I should clarify for all of the members who aren't familiar, he's not talking about Campbelltown, New South Wales. He's not talking about Campbelltown, Tasmania. Iain is talking about Campbelltown, Glen Scotia. And before we kick things off, yeah, it's where you are. Before we kick things off, I got to encourage the members watching along. You got to ask this man questions because he is a bastion of knowledge. He is a true Glen Scotia and Campbelltown geek. Please throw them all you can. I will put as many as we can in front of him. But I think that actually lets us jump off into what is a great starting point. Let's talk about Campbelltown.
Yeah. I mean, what a place, isn't it, Seamus? It really is. Campbelltown. Most of the listeners probably, already know about the basics of Campbelltown. But when you consider Campbelltown, where it is nowadays, you think, wow, that remote place, it's so difficult to get to. But, that obviously wasn't always the case. Campbelltown, geographically, was just strategically placed. It was strategically placed for a lot of different reasons. That maritime trade, the fishing industry, for industry, heavy industry, coal, heavy engineering with Glasgow. So it was just perfect, and that obviously gave rise to these distilleries in Campbelltown. And don't get me wrong, we talk about these distilleries from the early 19th century, up to 36 different distilleries came and went. But there was distilleries in Campbelltown before that, Seamus. There was a lot of distilleries that the names have been lost. We know the owners, we know the rough setup of them. So it's always been prevalent here, maybe more illicit than licit.
But it's that history that I think Campbelltown still has in the glass, because it's that Campbelltown funk, isn't it? There's a bit of illicit, there's a bit of dirty.
You get that, you get the funk through the whiskey, and Glen Scotia's always got it's maybe wrong to say it's always got it, but it's kind of something that you would say is it's omnipresent. It's there. Maybe sometimes it's hard to detect. It's sometimes hard to what is the funk and where is it, and it represents itself in different ways, different levels, different avenues, I guess, and that's a lot to do with flavour itself, so how the fermentation, how the distillation's undertaken is how that funk, if comes across. So yeah, it's Campbelltown-esque though, isn't it?
I mean, it's just Campbelltown. It is where it is in a glass. But I mean, we're 100 years ago. We're in the smallest Scotch whiskey region, and then jump 100 years forward. There's 2 distilleries, 3 distilleries, 2.5 distilleries active in Campbelltown, ready to go. What happened? What was the evolution? Where was the boom, and where was the bust?
Well, I mean, when you look at Campbelltown, everyone quotes the numbers. Let's say 36 different distilleries, but there was never 36 distilleries running in Campbelltown. I think at the maximum about 1887, there was peaks and troughs even throughout the 19th century. At any one point, there would be 21 distilleries running, which is quite a lot. still even at that point. Some of them would be small, some of them would be quite compact units. And that really continued through the 19th century, Seamus, right up until about the turn of the 20th century. There was obviously, at that point, there was wider influences, potentially the Patterson crash. There was, you were getting into unrest in the early 20th century, obviously First World War. You were getting into depressions after that. There was prohibition. Prohibition's an interesting one, actually, I would say, for Campbelltown. But there was a lot of changes. There was a lot of upheaval. The original owners were dying off, so these businesses were coming to the end of their life. Maybe there wasn't the appetite to run them. There was a lot of consolidation within the industry. So distilleries were getting bought and closed down in Campbelltown. So yeah, there was a lot happening. And really that took you right up until the 1930s, where you had Springbank, you had Glen Scotia, and you had, does anyone know what the other one is? There was one other distillery that was...
I've not got this. I've not got this.
I was wondering who's listening to me out there. So there's one other one that was running, and it was called Reclachen.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that was again a Mitchell. So that was run by Helen Mitchell, who was a lady at that time. So she was...
Mitchells were all over it.
They were all over it. They were all over it. So yeah, yes. So yeah, that's where you were. And they pretty much finished in the 19th century. So, post Second World War, then you were obviously 2 distilleries. So that was it.
It's mad. It's that kind of... Well, there was such limited production, I guess, from that point onwards. I mean, I remember, and maybe this is where we pivot to Glen Scotia, because every time we've met at the distillery, you've always talked about how little stock you have, especially from pre-2009. It sounds like there's just an enormous scarcity. Was there ever a boom where you did have stock, or was it kind of, for the last 50 years, it's been robbing Peter to pay Paul?
No, I mean, it's... when I started at Glen Scotia, so the first year I was at Glen Scotia, we were producing roughly about 600 casks, and that continued really for the next 5 years. So 5 years, there wasn't a lot happening, but it was really looking at the wider picture of the distillery, the setup, the flavour profile, the infrastructure, the engineering, everything that needed looked at, Seamus. So the stocks previous to that, when you consider Gibson, obviously it was shut for a long time. And I used to look at them and marvel. I said, my goodness, they were producing 2,000 casks a year, and they're only producing 600. But yeah, I mean, there was never a lot about. It was always quite... it was small scale, and any stock that had been here had been used up previously. So it was, and it's even to this day, obviously we're producing more, but
it's still not big.
No, it's scarce.
Yeah, absolutely. But look, for anyone, I should say, for any of our members who haven't been to Glen Scotia, one, you need to go, because it is such a moment just in time, because it is one of those distilleries that is clearly just crammed into the spaces it can, and it's almost like it can't get much bigger, because you've already put fermenters and washbacks and chargers in pretty much every cubic meter you've got, right?
Yeah, you're right, and that's what I tell people, Seamus. That is your typical Campbelltown distillery. It's a distillery that is evolved in the back streets, albeit Glen Scotia was probably a greenfield site in 1832 or more or less. But they evolve, and the houses evolve around them, and they're crammed in, and they're unique. So anyone that's not been to Campbelltown, when you come and visit Glen Scotia or Springbank or Kilcairn, Glengyle, then all these distilleries are pretty much evolved in the back streets, as you would say. So typical Campbelltown.
It's incredible, and I think for most whiskey drinkers, your typical view is somewhere in Speyside, Greenfield. You can see barley from where you're drinking the whiskey. And that's just not the vibe in Campbelltown. It is that industrial thing, and maybe that's what makes Glen Scotia. So I'm going to drag you away from the history, and we've got to talk production because we've got so many members saying, "What do you think makes Glen Scotia so unique, and what makes that spirit character so unique?" Well, you're the man who makes the spirit, so tell us what's happening.
Yeah, well, obviously, production-wise, we're doing well. I mean, what are we producing at the moment? Well, as I say, when you go back to 2008, then you would have been about 80,000 litres. We've moved it up incrementally, and it's been slow. This has taken years, 80, 250, 350, 500,000 for a long time, which seemed an incredible amount of whiskey to be producing to me, bearing in mind I started with just a couple of casks. And at the moment, we're probably sitting about just over 700,000, or just about the 700. And that's kind of, as it were, zenith, where we're looking at fermentation, we're looking at production, and looking at all the aspects that really make a good Glen Scotia. So we've changed the mash tun, as you know. So that's kind of it's slightly easier for us, probably physically. Production wise, it's not really changed a lot. It's taken a little bit of time, but the same methodology.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it was so amazing to see because, and thanks to your generosity, we got to see the distillery prior to the renovation and after you've replaced the mash tun. And I remember the last conversation we had before it changed was you saying, "It's going to change everything. I'm so worried about it. It's what's going to happen with the whiskey," and it sounds like it's kind of all tracking as it was.
Absolutely. Yeah, I tend to, and I was just thinking myself when I was speaking to you at the start there, maybe I'm kind of erring on the slightly negative all the time. Oh, it's going to be terrible, doom and gloom. I think it's, it's settling in really well, and I'm really pleased, and the guys are loving it, and it's working well. So, yeah, it's good. It's good. So I was, as I say, erring in that.
Yeah.
But it's working.
Under promise, over deliver. It's hard not to be concerned about those kind of things, and it'd be the only bit of kit that
Absolutely.
And I mean, it's got to be amazing for you, and it's a great opportunity for the members to ask as well. I mean, you've basically started distilling at Glen Scotia and gradually evolved into master distiller at Glen Scotia. What's your distilling experience, and how has it evolved over the years?
Well, for anyone that knows me, I obviously started at Glen Scotia. I'll be here 17 years this March coming. So for me, I guess the first 5 years, there was only three of us here. The manager I took over from, so I guess I was assistant manager for something like a month and a half, and then I took over from the manager who ran away. No, he left, he retired.
You chased him away.
So, funnily enough, he said he'd be back to visit me, and he's never come back yet. I see him about. So, it's a Campbellton thing, I think. Anyway, so I took over, and there was Davey and Jim. Davey's the mashman, Jim was the stillman at that time. And really, as I say, we spent that 5-year period just getting the place where it should be, looking at engineering, the process, the flavour, the wood, everything. We're just going over everything. And at that time, I worked with John Peterson, who was at Loch Lomond. And John was, he was a great guy, really, really whiskey-wise. He was very, very knowledgeable and such like. So it was a perfect opportunity for me to learn. And yeah, we worked away for the next 5 years, and we're in a good place. And funnily enough, this bottling that you've got is 2013, so that would be the end of that 5-year period. That would be that 2013 is when the Loch Lomond Group took over. So they
Yeah.
took over and invested in the brand and the distilleries. So we were in a perfect situation. That's when we took on extra guys. Sean and Gareth started at that time, expanded the production, and that's when we moved up to 350,000. So a huge leap for us. We're in a good place, Seamus, and it really, really worked well. So, yeah, I mean, that's 10 years. So, a master distiller, you know, so after in the job, distillery manager, it was master distiller. So, you're really looking at 10 years anyway for that kind of, that title, I guess. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think there's so many questions from the members here. I think we've got to address. Everyone's worried you've got empty bottles behind you, and I think it's a great chance to talk about what a master distiller spends their day worrying about.
They look empty.
Yeah.
So they look empty. Yeah. So they're all full of new make spirit. Okay,
now this is really the bread and butter of a master distiller. You're taking spirit samples on the daily, you're reviewing it. What are you looking for? What makes good spirit? What makes bad spirit? What are you turfing off to the blenders?
Well, I mean, Glen Scotia and blending, you know, it's obviously we don't produce enough really for the, you know, the don't get me wrong, there'll be small components as used now and again, but there's never going to be it's not like the heady days where there was, you know, a lot of Glen Scotia we using a lot of different components. You know, it's there's not enough. That's the bottom line. What we're looking for, really, you know, the Glen Scotia style, as I say, after that 5-year period, we kind of identified where we should be spirit-wise. So there's certain components in there, you know, in the new make spirit. First and foremost, it's got to have flavour. You know, it's got to have a flavour profile, and that's due to the fermentation process, short, medium, long ferments. And we identify certain components in here, higher alcohols, acids, esters, etc. So there's different elements in there. It's going to give us a lovely flavour, a lovely balance. It's going to be complex. You know, it's going to be robust. It's going to be oily. And here's the rub, as we discussed when you're here. Potentially, there's an element in there, a component that is given as a sodium element. You know, so sodium and distillation don't go, obviously, but that's, you know. So I often think to myself for the new make spirit at Glen Scotia, and I think how incredibly lucky we are to have such a well-balanced, you know, regionally it represents not only the distillery but the region of Campbelltown so well. It just works in so many levels. Yeah, and that's not just me saying that, Seamus. You know, that's obviously we get wonderful visitors, and it's wow, that's amazing. You know, I tasted etc. different distilleries, and this is, you know, this is really, really nice. So it's nice to get positive feedback.
Absolutely. Plus, you've won world's best single cask enough. I mean, I'd say your head's getting big, but I genuinely have never seen you be smug in your life, so I can't even say that. Look, it's. I think it's incredible spirit, and I remember, must have been a year or two back, you saying that it really was that point between 2013 and 2016 where you felt that spirit really peaked and came into its own. And you've sent so many cask samples over the years from that era. I can only assume it's because that's what's performing best for you right now. And obviously that 2017 onwards, still a little bit young, probably not sure where it's going to get to yet. But what did you change from 2012 to 2013 that started yielding that incredible spirit?
Well, you're right, you know, and that's well remembered, you know, very well remembered. I think it's, you know, it's a question of time, you know, so a lot of them is coming into its own now, you know, at this period in time. So you've obviously got something special there, 2013. There's certain years to me stick out, and that's the one, you know, that sticks out to me. because I always remember the casks and years with certain, certain time periods, if you like. It's like a timeline to me. 2008, 2009, 10, you started to get a lot of the peateds. 2013 was the end of that. Experimental period. Then when it is, to answer your question, the time we get into 14, 15, 16, then we're really honing what would establish, so a lot of these casks that we're using, we're potentially starting to differentiate with different casks, a lot of Jim Beam, a lot of Heaven Hills. There was some oddities, there was some Maker's Mark, some Buffalo Trace, and some Wild Turkey. So just trying different ones and seeing, how they would work out. But certainly, Jim Beam casks, etc., work incredibly well. So I think it's just a process of evolution. It really settled down, and it's working so well. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think the spirit's speaking for itself. And you've touched on something amazing in casks there, and a lot of questions from members are coming through and want to talk about the Bordeaux cask secondary maturation. And I promise members we will get there. But I know, Iain, and I know that we can't talk about this whiskey without talking about the first fill bourbons that started it all, because this was a secondary maturation in those Bordeaux's. And I never see you get more excited than when you're talking about a first fill bourbon. So, Iain, take us there first, and then we'll build on it with what's happened to this specific whiskey and these specific single casks, and then we'll tie it all together with tasting. But take us on the bourbons.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, when you look at older Glen Scotia, when you go back pre-2008, the early 2000s, then there was a lot of different casks. There was probably less, well, there was less bourbon, first fill bourbon, even second fill bourbon. There was slightly more of refill Scottish hoggies, refill wine, so there was a lot of variation in the wood. So we got to the point, looking at the casks, pretty much knew where we were with the flavour profile, if you would like, Seamus. And then we identified, obviously, certain, casks that I mentioned previously. So yeah, Glen Scotia, first fill bourbon, it works incredibly well. It really brings all the elements, all the flavours. You're getting a lovely sweetness, you toffee, vanilla, fudge, and it just works so well. I don't know whether it's that sodium element, or it's the oiliness, or it's the complexity, or it's the robustness, but for me, it's as good as it gets. It really does. It works so well.
It's spoken like a true master distiller. I've never met one that doesn't just love it in a first fill bourbon.
Even I'll tell you what, even slightly better if it really, really works as refill. If you get a wonderful refill, and we do fill refill bourbons too, specifically for that reason, because if you're getting a refill bourbon cask, then it's just as good, if not better, if it really comes together well. So yeah.
Absolutely. Sorry.
So I was just going to say, a marriage made in heaven.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I'm glad we're spending some time on it, because I think sometimes people don't think about the initial maturation as necessarily being the sexy bit of whiskey, but certainly from my time with Ben Rick Distilling Company, it was used to build a really hearty base and a really core flavor, and that's what allows you to do interesting finishing and interesting secondary maturations, is because you have this crux of typical Glen Scotia that is just incredible, that then you can do something insane like go and get some Chateau Margaux red wine casks out for and do a Bordeaux finish. And I guess twisting us and taking us there, I mean, a lot of our members right now are drinking this alongside, comparing this to the Victoriana, which is an incredible whiskey, and that's where we're playing with a wonderful sherry cask finish. Playing with these Bordeaux casks, I mean, we went through a few of these in the Bond on the day, and we've tasted through pretty much all of these single casks over the whole story. they're incredible. What's the story with these Bordeaux's?
Well, absolutely. You know, as you quite rightly say, Seamus, you know, you've got that wonderful base. It's robust, it holds its own, but yet it's got the DNA of Glen Scotia through there. So it works so well with different finishes. But all these finishes are all, I've got that historical connection to Campbelltown. You know, whether it's the ports, whether it's the sherries, whether it's the wines. Obviously, there's periods in the 19th century where it was slightly harder to get wine casks due to a chap called Napoleon. So yeah, I mean, they really work well. So obviously what you've got there, as you say, you know, I don't have a bottle here, but 48.3%, you know, the ABV, is 2013 first fill bourbon. So a lot of that would have been, again, you know, it would have been that mix of Heaven Hills, Jim Beam, Jack Daniels, actually, from that period. But you've got that 6 months finishing. That 6 months finishing in these Bordeaux red wine casks, you know, absolutely wonderful. You're going to get a wonderful, straight away, the red berries. You're always getting Glen Scotia really accentuates and highlights these red berries. You get a complexity to it, a sweetness to it, but yet you do get the core DNA. So you're getting the toffee, you're getting the vanilla, you're getting the sweetness there, which is, you know, beautiful. You know, so this is similar. So yeah, there's a lot of you know, there's a lot of background to that. It really works well. But I think that the important thing is what we discussed there, Seamus, is you're still getting the core DNA of Glen Scotia through the bourbon cask. But the finish is sympathetic. It's short. It's 6 months. And the combination of these two different Chateau, the 75% Chateau Margaux and the 25% is Salons Segurs, you know, so that they really give it that wonderful overtone there. So it really works well.
Yeah, they certainly do, and I think this whiskey is a wonderful example. And members who watch a lot of tastings will hear me bang on about this a lot, but it's a wonderful example of where texture can really complement a whiskey. And maybe it's the perfect example of it that you have a similar but not identical cast to the one in front of me. That I guarantee that texture is still pulling it through, because that's a Glen Scotia trait. It's got that creamy, chewy, milky texture that is, those oils just kind of can't help but dance across the tongue. Give that red berry bright fruit finish, and you really do get that kind of cream and berries and salty fruit characteristic. And it is just, I mean, it's an incredible whiskey.
It really is. It really is. You know, and that's you know, when you go back to this stuff, you know, you go back to the new make spirit, then yeah, you know, obviously that if everything, all the different components work, you know, if you get to a point where they work, you know, the new make spirit, get it in a good place, it works. Into the cask, you know, finding the right cask, if it works, absolutely. So the time you get to the finishing, absolutely, you know, it should really, all these components should come together. You know, it shouldn't be dominated by one or the other. It should really be, as you say, that marriage made in heaven, you know. And it's Glen Scotia, as I say, you know, yeah, I'm going to say this, haven't I? You know, I'm going to say it really works, but it, you know, it really, you know, if I stood at the side and was really impartial, the first thing I would say was, if this was another distillery, was, do you know, that really works? It works well. So, but yeah.
I'm getting peppered with questions by the members on the nitty gritty of this whiskey, so I hope you're ready, because I'm gonna fire it. Yeah. And first question, and I think it's a fantastic one, is we've got these incredible casks. We've given them one maturation to produce this wonderful whiskey. Now, are we reusing those red wine casks from Bordeaux? Are we giving them a second life? Are they being recycled to make another amazing whiskey? Do they go to Loch Lomond? What's the story?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, what you tend to find is And I'll give you an analogy. So the double cask is obviously it's got a 9-month finish in first fill PX sherry butts. So I had 2016. I had some of these left. New make spirit into them, 12 of them, and one of them has been released in Germany for the 50th anniversary of Hanseatic. So it'll be the same for these. So these red wine casks, absolutely, you know, we potentially will use, and you're talking quite a few of these, you know, obviously hogsheads. So we'll use a percentage of them, the best of them, for filling new make spirit into. So yeah, they really work well.
That's not surprising, and it leads me wonderfully into another question, and this one's from Sam Osborne. I think it's a great question. It's something we see a lot of working well, and it's these wonderful red wine casks getting a hit with peated spirit. Now, is this something that we're playing with? Is this something we're doing often?
Yes, absolutely. The red wine and peat. I actually had a tasting cask. I think it was a 2013. It was a cigar cask.
Hey, yeah.
Well, that I've got the 2001. I think is the one you tasted. But yeah, I mean the peat in the wine really works well. Again, you know. It's always going to be slightly trickier, I think. You know, it's getting the balance right and getting all the different components to come together. But I think when it does come together, it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. You know, it just takes a slight edge off it, maybe slightly cuts away some of the tannins a little bit. You know, a little peaty note there, which gives it a wonderful balance. So. But yeah, and again, you know, Seamus, it's obviously it's trying to stay true to the region, to the distillery, to the style. You know, a little bit of peat in there. You know, obviously using these casks which they would have used. So, yeah,
absolutely. And I'd love to stay on spirit for a moment longer there, because Glen Scotia is quite unique in doing completely unpeated and completely peated, and occasionally dabbling with somewhere in the middle. And for your production setups, are you doing mostly unpeated and occasionally hitting peated, or is it a little bit of a marrying throughout the year? Depends what's going.
Yeah, well, what I've always really done, Seamus, is I tend to do a month. I'm trying to think. In the early days, I would have. Yeah, I've always kind of done a month. So there's 3 different variations. So I started using these variations back 2008, 2009, 10-ish. We started with a lightly peated, which is roughly about, as a rule of thumb, about 17.5 ppm. Medium peated is going to be a 23 to 25 ppm, and the heavily peated has always been 54, 55 ppm. So that's at the start of the run. So at the end of the run, it's going to be a lot less than that, you know, potentially slightly less than a third, you know, at best.
Yeah.
So so I'll basically do 2 weeks, you know, through a month, a calendar month. I'll pick 2 weeks for, say, a lightly peated and 2 weeks for a heavily peated, and that's all we do. So there's not a lot of peated. It's the usual story, isn't it? There's not a lot of anything, really, is it? But there's certainly not a lot of Glen Scotia peated about. So, but yeah, it's, again, you know, some of these peateds in a first fill bourbon. Yep, very interesting.
What a surprise. Back on the first fill bourbons. I'm going to pull you straight off of that, otherwise we'll spend an hour talking about how much you love Maker's Mark. There's a wonderful question from one of the members. Yes, of course, Anthony McElwain. Always great questions. And it's down to barley. I mean, while we're on spirit, are you experimenting with any different kinds of barley strains? Have you got anything brewing?
So the barley, So I pretty much used the same maltster now for coming on for 17 years. So I've always dealt with Bourt Malt and Glenesk, Hillside, Montrose, which is an old distillery site. So I've always dealt with them. The early days I used Optic. Really good stuff, a lot of the peated aspect. Optic, Concerto, sometimes been a blend of the both, maybe Optic and Concerto. We're using Lorette, Diablo. What did we use for the local barley? That's slightly went out of my mind at the moment, but the local barley was quite interesting. Can't quite mind what that was, but yeah, we look at different strains, and yeah, it works well. It really does. The quality we're getting, the moisture, the nitrogen, the friability, everything about it is good. But so there's not really a desire.
You've just said something not public, Ian. You've just said something, and I know we both know, but I'm going to pretend I don't know. Local barley, Glen Scotia? What? You're not doing local barley. What's this? Tell me all about it.
All about it, yeah. My goodness, let the cat out the bag there. Yeah, absolutely. So we had a wee experiment with some local barley, and we had a short run, a very short run. How much did I do? 28 ton. So one lorry load.
I drank about a quarter of it, I think.
Yeah, it's down to 27 ton now, I think. So 1,000 litres. Yeah, it's good. It's obviously good to do different things, and it's good to obviously push the boundaries a wee bit. But all these things, I guess, have got historical overtones and historical connection with the distillery, the flavour, the style, everything. So it's nice. It's good to see.
Fantastic, mate. Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. I have to tell you something that we've seen quite a few comments for over the last week, and I don't know if I told you this last time I saw you. Do you know that we run a Whisky of the Year every year?
Yeah, yes.
Our members, they take it to panel, they vote what's the best whiskey of the month of the year and what's the best overall whiskey from the club for the year, and it's a pretty serious accolade. I'm seeing a lot of this might be the whiskey of the year already bouncing around, which I mean, it's not even December slot. They haven't even tasted all the whiskey. They're calling it early, and this could be a winner. I might have to fly back over with a trophy.
I can come to you.
There we go. As long as someone gets a flight out of it.
Do you know? Hey, all joking aside, that's that's incredible. It really is. Any as I say, I really appreciate the journey Glen Scotia has been on. It really has. It's been a wonderful journey. As I say, when I started back in 2008, I did question my sanity a little bit. But yeah, I just held on, I just pushed on, and yeah, it's been amazing. But I think the main thing for me in the journey at Glen Scotia has been the people. It's been you, Seamus, it's been the members of the Whisky Club, it's been everyone all over planet Earth has really made it possible, and they've been so just so supportive and so welcoming and helpful. I mentioned the new make spirit, people taste it, and these guys are tasting new make spirit all over Scotland, all over the world. It's small things like that. It really gives you the impetus to push on and try and make people smile and happy. So thank you.
It's a genuine pleasure, and it's people like you that make the whiskey industry what it is. I think I can remind all members, if you are in Campbelltown, just somehow, go to Glen Scotia. Tell them you're a Whisky Club member, because the team there are absolutely incredible. Iain obviously included, but not just Iain. Everyone there is absolutely fantastic, and it is so worth visiting. And it's with that that I can say that quite confidently, because there's a question firing up and down here saying, "This whiskey is amazing. Please tell me you're already working on something else together." I can say pretty confidently, thanks to my visit last month, we've got a few things brewing. There's a there's a bit to talk about, isn't there, Ian?
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, and for me, as I say, it's half the battle is, I've been there, I've visited you, you've been here, Seamus, so we know each other well. So yeah, absolutely. We'll never leave the members stuck. We'll always have something interesting for them, and try and get them, something that they really appreciate, and is true Campbelltown styles. So yeah, it would be good. It really would be good. I think that's what it's all about. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think each release is just going to get better and better. And for any members who do remember the rum cast that we did, what is that, 2020 Christmas? I think maybe off the top of my head.
Yeah.
That was an incredible whiskey as well. And they just continue to be incredible. So keep watching this space. Members, while I start wrapping this thing up, the last comments I would love to see from you all are, throw in what kind of casks you'd love to see. If you want to see something that's refill driven, if you want to see something that's bourbon driven, if you want to see something that's fortified driven, Ian and I will genuinely read all of these things. It's a club for a reason, and we want to get incredible whiskey that you want to drink. So look, it's with that I get to wrap up and raise a few massive cheers. One of which, Ian, I don't think you know this, but every VT that we run, we give a prize to one of the members to thank them for watching along, because we can't do this without them. So, John Beasy, massive cheers to you. You have won a bottle of next month's Whiskey of the Month, which is a wonderful Christmas whiskey from Glenfarclas. I don't think you could get much more Christmassy than the boys at Glenfarclas.
Yep.
For everyone else watching along, I just want to raise massive cheers, and I hope you join me in a massive cheers for fantastic glassware choice.
Look at the glass. Look at that glass. That's what you call a glass.
There you go. Massive cheers to all the members watching along, and Ian, a massive cheers to you as well.
Thank you very much, Seamus. Absolute pleasure. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to be here with the club, and yeah, absolutely. We'll need to do it again. We'll need to do it again. It's been absolutely wonderful. So I'm so pleased the whiskies went down well, because you're all, always a bit of apprehensive, how it'll work out. But yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much.
Whenever you want, just swing on down. I got to answer one last question, because Owen Rainbow asked the best Glen Scotia question ever. Is the creamy oiliness common in Glen Scotia? I can tell you, and Ian can tell you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Thank you.